Welcome to Powers Around the House. I recently made this MDF cupboard to house my consumer unit and then boxed in the main electrical cable below using some timber and plasterboard. So today I'm going to plaster this and show you exactly how I tackle the job. And this is the kind of small DIY job that I really love doing. And the reason for that is I got a small bit of plaster left over from my brother from a job he gave me. And I've got a roll of scrim tape left over, which I've just brought down from the shed. I've got some angle bead up here, which I'm going to use. It's left over from a job a couple of years ago. So now I've just got to find the right length and cut it down to size. So there we go. I've got two full lengths, one short length, and this one that's somewhere in the middle, which is going to be perfect. So the first thing we need to do is get some scrim tape like this, and this is used just to cover any joints like there and there between two sections of plasterboard, and this will just prevent cracking of the plaster at a later date. And don't forget, I'll put links to all tools and products in the description section below. Now this has an adhesive back to it, so it will stick itself to the plasterboard, then we cut it off with a knife. As you may notice then, this scrim tape wasn't sticking particularly well. Now there's two reasons for that. One, my scrim tape is quite old. I've just got this from the shed. It's been lying around from a job I did a few years ago. So that's not ideal, but it'll work. Number two is that this plasterboard has been on here for a while. So it gets a bit dusty, and sometimes you could possibly use something like SBR or PVA and apply it to the plasterboard first. I'm not going to do that today. I think it'll be fine. It's such a small job, but it does mean that it's not as sticky. And you'll notice there that I cut it slightly short from the end. That doesn't matter because we're going over that now with the angle bead. Which then brings me on to the next job. We now need to measure the length of the angle bead we want to cut. So I want about 1.4. I'm going to measure from the top of the angle bead. I'm going to mark it off with my thumb. Now take a set of tin snips. I'm just going to put a little slip like that. Now showing you closer, I'm going to snip right to the middle, like that. And I'm going to twist it round, go the other side. I'm going to snip that. And if you take your angle bead, you just fold it back and forth like that, and it'll just break away. Next important thing to do now is just take a little 45-degree angle off, like that. And what that does is it stops these bits bending up at the end and causing your plaster to scrape off or stick out and just give you a nasty angle. So I turn it round and do the same to the other side. Now when I place this up, it should be the right length. Perfect. Now when you're fixing your angle bead to the plasterboard, there's different ways to do it. I have shown how to do this in various other videos, and I'll put links to those on the screen now, and I'll link to them in the description section below. But one method is to use the multi-finish plaster that we're going to use to finish it, and you just put it along the edge and you stick your angle bead on it like this. You use a spirit level, get it where you want, and you can let it go off until it goes hard, and then once it's in place, you can then go back over it with a plaster. Another method is to use masonry nails. If you're going into masonry, you can even use those to hold it into place on plasterboard and then just plaster over it. Or one other method, which I'm going to use today, is using my staple gun. Now if you've got really bad outer line walls and you want to use a spirit level, then it's probably best to use the plaster, because that way you can manipulate it into place. Today I've got my plasterboard exactly where I want it, so I'm just going to use staples and follow the line of the plasterboard, but it's entirely up to you. And this is just a Stanley Aircraft staple gun. I'm using the 6mm staples, and again I'll put a link to this in the description section below. So as you can see, I only used a few staples. You don't need too many. If the wall is slightly wavy and you really pin it to that wall, it's going to follow the line. If you just put the odd few as you go down, leave a little gap behind it, you'll find that the angle bead will stay nice and straight, and it'll sort of take out any waves of the wall, unless you want to follow the curve of the wall, of course. So I'm not sure if you can see that clearly, but that staple there has just nipped a bit of the metal, but it's absolutely fine because it's gone flat. Now occasionally you do miss, and I did just miss a few. And if it hits the metal and the staple sticks out slightly, just pull the staple back out and just have another go. Ideally, you want the staple to pop through one of the holes there and just push it down gently. You don't want it forcing itself through the metal and stick it out, because that's going to affect your plastering later. So with that in place, it's time to go and mix up some plaster. Now, because I'm only using a small bit of plaster today, I'm going to add a little bit of water, add the plaster using a bucket trowel, mix it by hand. I'm going to get it down to the right consistency, and then hopefully we'll be good to go. Now, can I just apologise if I'm not speaking properly? My mouth has gone numb because it is bloody freezing out here, so I'm going to get on with it. So I'm literally starting with a really small amount of water like that. If I don't have enough plaster, I can always come out and mix some more, but in reality that's probably going to be more than enough. I'm just going to put the plaster in using the bucket trowel rather than pour it in, because if I pour it, there's a likelihood I'm going to pour too much in there and then it's game over. I'm going to need more water, and then we're just going to ruin the plaster. I haven't got much left anyway, so I've got to make the most of this. The other thing that I'm going to add quickly is this plaster is really old. It's out of date, so it's going to go off really quick, which is no problem because it's a small job. But if you were doing a big job and using out-of-date plaster, you can get caught out, and I have done that in the past. And again, I'll put a link to a video on the screen now where I was plastering a ceiling and almost got caught out. Oh, it's windy now too. So there we go. I'll do 2 shovelfuls and we'll see how we go. Now you can see that's getting thick and hard quite quick, so I'm going to get in there and get that on the wall very fast. Now, one other thing I didn't mention outside was that you're going to need a bucket of clean water as well to clean off your tools. So I put a little bit of water on a brush, and I rub that over my hawk. And this is the hawk, and this is just what you put your plaster on. And again, I'll put a link to all the tools in the description section below. So before we start, I'm just going to get a little bit of plaster, put it onto my hawk. I'm just going to rub it around the hawk like that. And this will prevent the plaster from slipping off here onto the floor. Well, I say prevent, it'll minimise. So now if I'm going to go from the outside here in, I want to get it on the right hand side of my trowel down there. So to do that, we put it onto the trowel this way. Oh dear. That wasn't good. Now, although I got to go over this with a second coat in a minute, I'm just going to go over this with a wet brush and just clean off any plaster like that, because obviously I've got paint on this wall here and I'm not intending on changing this. So as long as I can keep this plaster wet now with a brush, I can go over it with a little cloth or a rag in a minute, wipe it off, and we should get no residue of plaster on this wall. But as this plaster is quite old, it's going off really quick, so you've got to be careful, because if it goes off hard on there, you might find you pull away the paint when you take it off if you leave it on there too long. So I've got that first coat on. I'll be honest, it hasn't been easy. This plaster is going off stupid fast. So I've smoothed it in the best I can. I've had a good clean up around the edge there, where I'm going to be painting later, because we don't want any lumps of hard plaster there. Now we'll go outside, and let's take a look at this plaster. So I mixed this plaster probably about 20 minutes ago. I got it on the wall, it started going off silly fast. And look at this. That is one bucket down the pan. Look at that plaster there, absolutely ridiculous. It's like plaster of Paris. So now I'm going to get on with cleaning these tools and try and salvage them before they're ruined as well. So I've cleaned the tools the best I can. That is the bucket, absolutely ridiculous. That is rock hard. So that bucket's gone, and whilst I should really say give up, go and buy some new plaster, I'm not really defeated. I'm half tempted to go and get that bag of plaster and just try and get it on that wall as quick as possible and finish it off and see how I get on. I don't know, maybe I got something wrong with me. So here we go on now with the second coat. I've made this one a bit wetter just to compensate for the fact that this one went off so quick, and hopefully we'll be okay. So I'm just wetting this with a brush because it's going off very quick. You wouldn't normally do it this quick, but I got no choice today. So you can see here now, it is possible by putting water on that and sort of going over it to sort of pull the plaster back a bit, because I mean this has been a nightmare. I'm going to be honest with you, perfectly honest. It's not quite how I wanted it to go. I have almost pulled it back so it looks okay, but I've almost had to slice bits of plaster out to flatten this wall, which is ridiculous really. I mean, it is going off like that. So I'm going to keep going on now, and what I'm essentially doing here is the polishing off stage, which is kind of what you do after your plaster has usually gone off. So you put on your one coat, you'd let it go off a bit tacky, you put your second coat on, then you sort of let it dry a bit, and then you come back and you can take your time a bit. As long as the wall's not too big, if you're a beginner, you can usually, you know, keep on top of it, and it's really good, especially in cold weather like we got today. It wouldn't usually go off that quick, but this plaster has been a nightmare. So I'm going to keep on chipping away at this. What I would say is, if you want to see how to plaster, watch one of my other videos. I've got a playlist, I'll put a link to that in the description section below, and go and follow that, because this video is not a very good tutorial, to be honest with you, but it's probably good for you to see where it does go wrong sometimes. One other thing you'll notice here is you'll see me taking the trowel from right to left. Now I'm doing that because this has gone off already, so I'm just doing it to polish it. You've got to be careful not to do that too much on a small section like this when it's wet, because what you'll do is create a little curve in it, and you want to keep it flat. So ideally you want to sort of go from top to bottom with your trowel like that, and that'll make sure it's flat. Then when it's gone off and you're just doing the polishing off, then it's fine to sort of go across it a bit. Just be careful that you're not going to create that sort of little short curve, or otherwise when you look down the side of it, it will be bowed inwards. The other important thing is obviously keeping this trowel clean. I'm using this brush and just brushing it off like this into the bucket, because otherwise if that plaster goes a bit hard on there and you rub it over, there's a good chance you're going to create like a scratch in the plaster. You don't want that. So after a lot of scrubbing, a lot of scraping, I've cleaned up. I'm 2 buckets down, but we're done. So let's take a closer look. So apologies for the poor lighting, but hopefully you can see there how I've managed to pull this back in the end. I managed to get a decent smooth finish. It's not absolutely perfect, but this plaster honestly went off rock solid in no time at all. Now this section down here, I plastered down to make it nice and neat, but I will be going over that with skirting board out here. I'll be showing how I cut and fit that in another video. Now I know quite often people will leave this bit behind the plasterboard or stop it a bit short. I've taken it just down a few millimeters off the floor, purely because it gives you a nice flat surface for when you're fitting a skirting board. If you don't, you often find that you have to pack the back of the skirting board to get it level, or otherwise the skirting board wants to dip backwards like that. So I think we can safely say there are 2 key points to take away with you from this video. Number 1 is don't use out-of-date plaster. Number 2 is don't follow any of my plastering tutorials on YouTube. Anyway, I gotta go and clean my dirty Crocs, so if you have enjoyed this video, can you please give it a like? If you haven't done so already, can you please subscribe to my channel and press that bell icon for regular notifications. I've been Pouts Around the House. Ta-ta, farewell.